All right. Hello, everybody. First time here for Inside Sport at Salford. This is going to be a semi-regular thing that we do where we try to bring somebody who's somewhat recognizable. I don't know if you know this guy. But a few times a term, we're going to try to bring you somebody that you should stop and make some time for in your evening. And we're going to start this series with Clive Tyldesley. And so can we give him a warm welcome, please? So, Clive, I have to start with the fact that you have had let's not call it, you've had a great career. And you've had moments.
Whoa.
Well,
whoa. Can we cut?
Let's start again.
Start again.
Having a great career. But it has been a career that has changed throughout time. You know, you were news, commentary, doing all sorts of different things. And now you're doing something even a little bit more different as you're doing commentating, but you're now writing. And I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about the change in skills that you've had to go through throughout a lifetime and how you've approached that in terms of how do I stay relevant? How do I keep changing skills in order to change with the market? You can go ahead and take that.
I hope it's all the same skill. The reason that I've spoken with Taylor and agreed to come here as a guest lecturer over the course of the next 2 or 3 years is that I believe that while the consumption of media changes and the platforms change, the language and the look of the media that we create and consume changes, the essence is the same as when I began in, would you believe, 1975, is communication. What we are trying to do is engage people's attention. I mean, engagement is a 21st century word, but actually it's probably a 12th century concept. It's creating a trust in a friendship, a friendship with millions of people that I'll never meet. To try to convince them in the way that I communicate that you can believe me. I'm invested in this sport, which I love, in this business, which is the only business that I ever wanted to work in. And so, yeah, we can talk in detail about all the different aspects of communication. We can talk in detail about all the different jobs that I've done down the years, and we can talk in detail about all the different means of communication today. But communication has never been more important in my lifetime. I am 71 years of age. I've been here a long fucking time. But communication has never been more important because it's being fudged. People are being brainwashed. Lies are becoming truth. And so it actually requires a business which is committed to keeping communication channels open and honest and earnest and free. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is what career you've signed up to be. So I'll leave it to you. Good luck with it. But I know you want to enjoy it, and you will enjoy it, and sport is sport, and sport's there to be enjoyed. But don't underestimate what you're taking on here, because communication is really, really important, and it's what matters most to me.
Communication is important, and it's the way that you communicate across platforms that I think has sort of made it, a distinguishing point in your career from radio and TV and the written media. You've sort of been able to hit people across platforms. But I was wondering if you could sort of take me back to the beginning a little bit. We were talking just before we came on that you actually did a little bit of comedy work back in the day. You took a comedy show to the Edinburgh Fringe. Is that right? And so you've always had this interest in communication, probably for a very long time. How did that develop? I'm talking early career. We got a lot of early career people. So early career, what do you think made a difference for you? Finding your voice, finding your confidence, and not just the want to communicate, but the ability to. And actually, I don't need to give you this. You can just go ahead.
I think I've got to be careful that I don't start telling tales from an era which is, something you guys see in movies or maybe read about in school history classes. It's that long ago, and there are far too many people of my generation who don't think that anything good has happened on the planet since about 1975. Music's shit, movies are shit, politicians are shit, transport's shit. I am not one of those people. I kind of like 2025. There are things I don't like about 2025, but there were things I didn't like about 1975 either. So I hope that, particularly through having four big things, your kind of size, which I loosely call children, they're all actually now 30 plus. And this year, two tiny, tiny things, which are very, very dear grandchildren, which have arrived in my life. I get the progression, and I understand that the world keeps turning. It just turns a little differently to when I was a university student. When I was always going to get good enough A levels to get to university, but I think it was probably an era. We're talking about the early 1970s. Probably something like 50% of students, I think, went to university back in the 1970s. So it wasn't uncommon to aspire to a university career. But I wanted to do media at university, and in the whole of the UK, there were, I think, 4 media courses. Now there are 4 at every university. I didn't get an offer to do any of those courses. My dad was a businessman, not a wealthy businessman. He worked for a domestic fuel company out of Darwin near Blackburn. So I'm a child of this. I was born in Bury. I'm from this part of the world. So I kind of did a deal with him, and I did a kind of business degree, business and politics. But I did something which you must do. Even in 1972, I did one thing, which was relevant to what you must do. And that is, I was proactive in terms of anything to do with media at the university in Nottingham where I was. I wanted to get involved in. We had no university radio station or TV station back then, but we had a university newspaper. I was the editor of that university newspaper by the end of my first year. We had what Taylor was referring to. We had a kind of drama society, which had a booking at the Edinburgh Festival every year on the Fringe. It was an era, you probably have heard of Monty Python's Flying Circus, which was a very popular TV.
Hands up if you've heard of Monty Python.
Yeah.
Watched
okay.
it? All right. Yeah,
okay.
Still relevant.
But my time at university was when it was happening, and it came out of the Edinburgh Fringe, out of the Edinburgh Festival Fringe, the Cambridge Footlights, the Cambridge University comedy performance was very famous. And I proposed that we should have our own footlights. I wrote and acted in those comedy reviews 2 years at the Edinburgh Festival. And then what we called Social Committee, which was the union committee that booked all the bands for the university, I got involved in that too. So anything that I could do to involve myself in media, I did of my own accord. And don't think for one moment that graduating from Salford with a 2-1 or even a first is going to impress prospective employers. They will want to know about your CV. They will want to know what else you've done to get your hands dirty of your own accord, what you volunteered to do in order to further your education in media over and above anything that Taylor or I can teach you. And I'm sorry if it sounds boastful, I did that. Mm-hmm. And so that's what got me my job as a runner at Radio Trent, commercial radio station, when it came on air, when I graduated from Nottingham with my industrial economics and politics degree. To my dad's shock and horror, I said, I've got a job at a radio station. Doing what? Making tea. I did the late night rock show for the first 3 months because the guy who was going to do it never appeared. but I was volunteering to do sport and stuff. And that, in your first break, is your biggest break. You know, once you get your foot in the door, nobody's chucking you out. So be proactive. If there's any example you can take from my career, nothing to do with my commentary or Champions League finals or World Cup finals, take that example that actually your university degree course is only a starter for the ambitions that you've got. And yeah, I managed to get a runner's job at Radio Trent within 6 months. I was the Nottingham Forest home and away reporter, same age as the players. They became my best mates. In an era when, after the game, we all went out for a lager or two together. And Brian Clough, the famous Brian Clough, was the manager. He was the first manager I worked with. Very, very difficult man, but inspirational man. And then you're grabbing opportunities, then you're making contacts, then you're in, and one thing leads to another. So, yeah, forget anything to do with my early career in terms of any input or knowledge that I can give you about inroads and routes into the industry. I have no idea how it works today, except that I do know that what you've done voluntarily, what you've tried to do over and above what these guys are giving you on the course, will count for an awful lot.
Even Clive Tyldesley, great Champions League start at a radio station, you know, doing overnight rock. I mean, that just goes to show you that it doesn't really matter where you start. It's about how you keep going, the effort that you put in along the way. That's a nice little nugget. We've been talking a little bit in class about who we like as journalists, you know, or just people in the sports media. And it's actually been something I've been wanting to ask you all week. Who are some people in the sports media today, or that you respect, people that have grabbed your attention and say, I like the work that you do?
There are plenty. There may be more that I don't.
That'd be a bonus to hear.
I was talking to some of the guys after the session that we did this morning, and I'm essentially a football commentator. I do other things. Football commentators don't change the world. We don't save anybody's lives. We don't contribute to the GDP of the nation. But an awful lot of people would like the job that I do, and that's what actually makes it so valuable to me. The fact that I got the opportunity to do what I really wanted to do, and that has made me, I'm not precious about anything that I do. You know, we did the session today and we were joking about commentators and stuff, and yeah, I mess up just like everybody else, but I hate it when I do. The one question, I'm fine with AMAs, but the one question that I completely lose my sense of humour over is when people say, what's the biggest mistake you've ever made? What's the biggest gaffe you've ever made? It's like I'm supposed to laugh at that. The biggest, I know what they are, don't you worry, but they wake me up in the middle of the night. You know, I hated making those mistakes. They're not funny. I mean, nobody died, but they're not funny to me, because even though my job is no big deal and it's not really a serious thing, shouting out footballers' names, I take it seriously because it's what I wanted to do, because lots of other people do it or want to do it, and so I want to do it as well as I possibly can. And one of the best ways to learn about the job is to listen to other people doing the job or just communicating and think, shit, I wish I could do that. And very often we were joking this morning about Olivia Dean. Was anybody here when I was talking about Olivia Dean?
Say it with your chest.
Why am I knocked out by Olivia Dean? Because she is very, very talented, but she writes about love with a real insight. I mean, I think her writing is maybe her strongest suit of many. And I'm just in total awe of people who can use the language. And I get to work with the same vocabulary that Olivia Dean and whoever your favourite novelist is and whoever your favourite playwright is. I can use the same words as they can. I just can't use them as they use them. And to sit in front of a screen and watch a drama that makes you cry, to listen to music and listen to words that make you cry or just make you shiver with how good they are. And then to listen to broadcasters, people who can really, really communicate. And it might be Stephen Fry, it might be David Attenborough, it might not be a sports commentator, but that's where my bar keeps getting raised, and I think, shit, I've still got an awful long way to go here. So, yeah, the use of the language, all of those journalistic things that we talked about this morning are important, but when people use our language brilliantly and stop us in our tracks with their creativity, you guys can do that. It's all there for you. All you're getting it from this guy and from me, when I pop in from time to time, there's some kind of basics, some framework, but it's down to you to ask yourself, who shakes me to my soul when I hear them speak or sing or read their material? And, can I do that? Well, you'll be going some to reach the peaks that the people that have really knocked your socks off, as my mum used to say. But try. Try. That vocabulary is there for you. The use of words. We were talking about commentators this morning. Peter Drury's probably the leading guy in my profession at the moment. I know him really well. He's a much nicer person than me, by the way. He's a lovely, lovely guy. And he commentates in a way I would never commentate. He is the commentator poet, or whatever you want to call it. Yeah, fine, okay, I get it, but it's not kind of what I really want to do. But he's trying. He's trying to use the vocabulary that we have at our disposal to make an impact, to make memories, to be a part of those moments and create a little part for himself in those memories. And I admire him intensely, I really do, that he's out there trying his best with the words. Words, that's what you've got. They're your tools. Never mind those screens and everything, just those letters. Just it's how you assemble words and how you cut through to communicate with people. And it doesn't have to be Olivia Dean. It might be a TV ad. What's the greatest TV ad ever made? Has anybody ever seen Ronseal Woodstain does what it says on the tin? Whoever wrote that, whatever advertising agency it was, they should just canonized him, given him £1 million and sent him off to his own private island. It's brilliant. You think of all the flowery nonsense you see in fucking car adverts, and we're coming up to Christmas with the perfume, the semi-porn. It's like, what is going on here? And you get 30 seconds into the ad and you think, what is this for? Ronseal, I would never paint my fence because I know I'd make a mess of it. But if I ever did, I would buy Ronseal Woodstain. Why? Because it does what it says on the tin. Simple use of words. And when it happens and you hear it and you see it, you think, wow, wish I could do that. Please try to connect and identify the people who can do that, because they're the people you need to aspire to, not me.
Inside Sport, brought to you by Ronseal Woodstain.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, does what it says on the tin.
That's great. You were talking there earlier about the use of language, and there's somebody that I've always liked named Doc Emmerich, because in one season, somebody went through and looked. He used 150 different words for pass. Lob, chucked, pushed, whatever. And there are so many different ways that you can put it together. I like that question, or I like your answer there, but I'd also like to hit the other side. I think everybody who likes sport has a little bit of sports hate that lives in them. Not hating people, but stuff that comes up that just riles you up about sport when you're watching telly. I'd like to know what Clive Tyldesley yells at his TV about when he's sitting there. What really fires you up about sport? What gets, we're journalists, we're objective, but there's some passion that lives in there. What fires you up?
Well, it probably won't surprise you when you know my age and everything to know I love golf. And I play golf. My wife plays golf. Our boys play golf. If you don't get it, I understand. But if you do get it, boy, I mean, it's honestly, yeah, go on, stick the needle in. It is such an addictive sport, and it's so impossible to get anywhere close to ever mastering. Nobody will ever go around in 18, you know. There will never be a perfect, there'll never be a 9-dart finish or a 147 in golf. So the greatest sporting event of all in my little world is the Ryder Cup. And why? Because it's a team event played by individuals. I mean, you get moments in sports where, you know, the clocks run down and they bring the kicking team on and there's an NFL game to win, or there's a guy stood on the free throw line and the clocks run down, and it's an individual in a team sport. But the Ryder Cup, golfers are probably the most selfish individual elite sports people you'll ever meet, because you can play for a team, but there's only ever two hands on the grip. It's only ever you. You can have the best caddy, the best coach, the best sports psychologist, the best family, whatever, but you're still hitting the damn thing, you know. And worse still, you can hit it whenever you want, and it's somehow worse that there's nobody pushing you or trying to stick their studs into your shins while you're trying to hit it. It's all down to you. It's all on you, except that in the Ryder Cup, you're not doing it for yourself, where you can throw a club and go into a darkened room for 24 hours. You're doing it for 11 other guys, their caddies, your captains, and all the millions of us who become totally invested in our team winning the Ryder Cup. You're actually an individual playing in a team situation. And yet, somehow, the spirit of golf, the ethos of golf, and how many sports are there where the players call penalties on themselves? You know, it's a very unusual sport like that. I mean, I've been around golf, thankfully, from when my dad first put a golf club in my hands. And if you are perceived to be a cheat in golf, I mean, it's a death sentence. There is a real kind of code of honor in golf. And so, you know, when in the midst of this wonderful event, this Ryder Cup, which is Europe have won and then they've lost, and then somehow it comes down to a couple of matches at the end, and Keegan Brandley is stomping around trying to, in the eyes of some poor official who's called a referee, you know, like Roy Keane used to get in the eyes, saying that Justin Rose can't have that drop. Off. I mean, what? I mean, leave it to the referee. He's the guy who knows the rules. He might have got it wrong, but leave it to him. You know, Justin's still got a difficult shot to play. You asked. You asked me. There is a spirit in sport, and it's compromised by money and hype and fame. Of course it is. And I'm a name dropper, sorry, but amongst one of my really closest friends, I had my 70th birthday party last year, and there weren't many sort of famous faces there, but Graham Souness was there. Graham Souness, I go way back with. Graham Souness would break you in two to win a football match. I mean, he would break your leg to win a football match. If that was the difference between him winning and losing a football match, he would break your leg. Roy Keane, who is less of, I mean, I know less, but is still a good friend and an acquaintance, would break your leg to win a football match. I can't get my head around that level of, whatever you want to call it, brutal competitiveness. And yet, do you know what? We get on because I'm probably the same about broadcasting and communication. I'm probably not, I think I'm okay to work with as long as you're trying. I don't suffer fools really, and you know, around the people I'm working with. It is a big sort of team sport because everybody is important. The guy that sets up the sound, the riggers who put the scaffolding up, the woman who's in your rear with all the countdowns. I mean, everybody, we all work together, and none of us, we can't get the show on air without each other. And if all of those people, and usually they are, have got the same pride in the output that I've got, then I'm fine. But that's our spirit. It somehow don't ever lose the spirit of sport. Why is sport so wonderful? Why does it bring such joy and despair? Why does it create memories like almost nothing else in our lives? It's the spirit of competition, the spirit to shake your opponent's hand at the end and say, well done, even though you say, oh, I lost it, yeah, whatever. But and so whenever that spirit is broken, that's probably what. And I think it's on the commentator, particularly in the 21st century, to say it if he sees it or she sees it.
Yes, definitely. Speaking of golf, though, one of the things I've always found very weird about golf is that fans sitting at home can be watching TV and say that guy did the wrong drop, she didn't drop where she's supposed to, can ring in to Golf HQ and say that person, and they can penalize them. How do you feel about that?
I think it's dangerous, but I mean, really, you're asking me about VAR in a sense, aren't you?
I guess that's, yeah, except it's everybody at home who can also do it.
I mean, VAR is a monster that we've created because we care so much about the outcome of football matches. And when the outcome of any sporting contest becomes almost bigger than the contest itself, bigger than the spirit of the game, it is a monster. It's dangerous because we want it to tell us when we human beings have made a mistake, but actually then we regret having ever gone that far. And in a sense, I think, I mean, golf is obviously covered in a very different way to how it was 15 years ago. Whenever anybody hits it in the rough, somebody goes and takes a still photograph. You know that kind of little graphic where you see the ball, how it's sitting? That's actually a guy goes in with a still photograph, which, of course, the still photograph in my childhood, I had to go to the chemist and you got it back 10 days later. It's a still photograph which is sent immediately and can be broadcast immediately. There's a big on-the-shoulder handheld camera right there on the scene, and there are microphones which are picking up everything that everybody said. So sitting either in your lounge or on your train with your tablet or wherever you're consuming this, you're there. I mean, we now take you routinely into the dressing room corridor before a game. I mean, it would be a strange football match now if there wasn't a camera with access to seeing the players just before they emerge. I mean, that didn't happen 15 years ago. That was always sort of sacrosanct area. You saw them when they came out, when the fans in the stadium saw them. Now the fans in the stadium see them on a big screen before they see them with their own eyes. So all of these advances, which are fine, I understand, because we can do it, because technology allows us to do it, and because we crave more and more. We want an interview at half-time now with the player. What are they going to say? Really? I mean, what on earth? Fine. Okay. You better go back to the dressing room. All we're trying to do is kind of reinvent the wheel all of the time. Actually, the joy is in the sport as it is, and just the good coverage of sport is to see it from the best seat in the house. Really, I mean, that's. The best commentary positions are right next to camera one, which is the main camera on the halfway line at a perfect height, and that's the seat that you want in the stadium if you're there. Everything else is a bit of embroidery, and I just fear that we've got to. Yeah, it's a little bit like going back to the Ryder Cup. There was a lot of build up to this last Ryder Cup. Oh, it's going to be rowdy in New York State, and it's going to be lively. The European players have got tapes now that they'll listen to of abuse beforehand. I mean, basically, you're given a license. You'd almost be disappointed if the people that turn up at the course don't abuse the European. What we've been listening to these tapes for, they didn't abuse us. Oh, okay, don't worry, we'll have a few beers and we'll abuse you. And actually, what you've done is, through hype, you've created something which didn't need to happen and is now a little bit dangerous for the Ryder Cup because you fear that, hopefully in Ireland's probably the right place for the next one, and we might just be able to bring the temperature down a little bit. So, sport is pure. Sport is dramatic. Sport is surprising. Sport is thrilling. You don't need to hype it.
I think sport's been around for a really, really long time for humans.
Just cover it.
Yeah, there's a reason that we like
Yeah.
it. The next thing I want to talk to you about is that, in journalism, we many of us are hired by, the organization that we work for, ITV, BBC, whatever it is. And we have to be very concerned about, who we work for and the standards that they have and things like that. But I think one of the things that we've realized about journalism is we have to be concerned about our own brand. Brand Taylor Umland, brand Clive Tyldesley. And throughout your career, your brand has changed. You have been known as one thing, you've been known as a commentator, you've been, you're starting to be known as a little bit as a writer. You're really starting to change what you're known for. And I was wondering if you could talk to me a little bit about that brand management aspect of your career, because I think that's one thing for everybody to understand here is, your work will stand for itself. But in the day and age that we live in, you really got to be able to put yourself out there and have a unique niche that people can really start to trust you with. And I was wondering if you could talk about your own brand.
Yeah, I'm not sure that I've consciously massaged that. I talked a little bit about this morning, really, and I think particularly in the 21st century, you've got to take ownership of what you say publicly, what is published in your name. I mean, that obviously social media has changed the landscape somewhat, and it's a more perilous business now to open your mouth. I think we're seeing that with the likes of Gary Neville and Gary Lineker at the moment, who I admire for what they're prepared to at least say. You don't have to agree with them, but the way that you're castigated by almost like dark forces, it's what I call the Daily Mail morals. There is some kind of a perception of some mass objection to what they're doing and saying, and actually starts to drown out maybe a majority that actually think, yeah, well done, thanks for saying that. It's a difficult area because I've never been a gambler, but TalkSport, when ITV got rid of me, TalkSport gave me an opportunity to work for them, which I really, really appreciate, and I enjoyed. I went back to my sort of original radio days. But part of the gig, because of the nature of the sponsorship of most programs on TalkSport, was to read out the live odds once in each half of the commentary for the program sponsor, and I just never felt comfortable with it. I managed to dodge one or two other things that they wanted me to do. There's a kind of a charity bet which they do, and I said I'd rather not do that, even though it was actually for a charity that I was a patron of. And it wasn't a big moral thing, it was more a reputational thing. I just felt that betting was tomorrow's nicotine, and it probably would be best not to be associated with actually promoting it. And so at the end of the year, the first season, I actually stood down and said, look, yeah, thank you, but I can't really do this. I've since had betting charities contact me and say kind of thank you. I've met bereaved families, people who committed suicide, and I know an awful lot more now about the blight of betting, really, in our country. We're talking about probably a suicide a day now in the UK. So I become a kind of campaigner. I'm very careful how far I go, because it's like racism. I've never experienced racism in my life, so I don't really know. I've never been a gambler, so I don't really know. So I'm careful how much I commit to it. But I've already been accused of virtue signalling. Well, I mean, I'm not quite sure. There are lots of, I'm going to sound old-fashioned for a moment, lots of new phrases that have been introduced in the vocabulary. I'm not sure what virtue signalling really is. But I suspect that some of it comes in a rather sinister way from the betting industry, who can run, their own campaigns against anybody who stands up against them. So you do have to be more conscious than ever about what appears in your name. It's very easy to quote out of context. It's very easy to misrepresent. It's very easy to misquote, actually, but it's very easy to misrepresent true feelings and stuff. So I'm trying not to paint a difficult picture, because I want you to be bold. I want you to, I want you to carry communication forward, and I want you to be trailblazers, because there's some ground to make up in the current sort of media world, which has now been taken over in part by influencers with truly vested interests, and by club media departments and so on. So I want you to be bold and brave and courageous, but you do have to be. I certainly have to be a little bit more careful about my reputation. I hope that what reputation I built over the years is a kind of trust, a kind of relationship, as I said before, that you build with millions of people that you never actually meet. I think warmth is the greatest single quality of a popular broadcaster. I say this quite regularly, and people shake their heads and wonder what I'm going on about. I mean, I worked for ITV for many, many years, and ITV's A-listers are Bradley Walsh, Dermot O'Leary, Declan Donnelly, people who can look down that little black hole and at the end of the camera and somehow make you feel as if they're talking to you, and as if you'd like them. You'd like to go and have a pint with them. And by the way, I know all three of them, and you would like to go and have a pint. They are that person. And so I think I learnt this from my predecessor, who was a great man called Brian Moore. I thought I was sharper and quicker and knew more about football before he retired. When I was his understudy, I thought it was better than him, really. I was nowhere near him in terms of the relationship that he built with the audience. The audience, people he never met, liked him. They trusted him. Why? Because he was warm, and he was knowledgeable, he was earnest. If you can bring yourself to the party, by all means follow all the guidelines that Taylor and Sani and Emily and I try to give you, but bring yourself to the party. Bring your own personality to the party. Let's hear that in your commentary, in your reporting, in your writing. And if there's enough of you there, and you care enough about connecting with people and engaging with people, never mind your number of followers, engagement is the key in social media. And if you can do that, then hopefully over the course of many years, and fortunately I've had those many years, I've had that opportunity, then I just hope that, when the presenter says, and your commentators tonight are, and there are certain names, and you see the GIFs on Talk Sport straight away, people hanging themselves and whatever. I just hope that whether people thought I was good, bad or indifferent, there was never, oh, for fuck's sake, not him. That there was, go on then, yeah, at least, and maybe some say, oh, thank goodness, we're in safe hands tonight. Clive and whoever, Clive and Ali, Clive and Andy, Clive and whoever are doing it, it'll be okay. And that's probably as good as you can get, I think, in the 21st century, an acceptance that, yeah, okay, I'll take that. That's probably about the biggest compliment you can get now.
All right, I'm going to open up the floor for questions.
Absolutely,
in just
please.
a second, but I've had one question to ask you since I was probably 14.
Oh, no.
When you were doing the FIFA games,
yeah,
what was your favorite line, and did you come up with it?
Well, and as you might imagine, I'm going to give you a really perverse answer to that. I inherited FIFA. You guys have probably got a better historical knowledge of FIFA than what years I did it. I think I did it for about a decade. And the late John Motson was my predecessor. And John didn't really get it. Freddie, his son, I think was too young to play, and John just sort of kind of took the money and read the script. And FIFA's made by EA, it's made in Vancouver. And the script that I inherited from John honestly, it had gold miners in it, and it was very kind of Pan-American, and if we weren't talking about gold miners, we were talking about bursting the onion bag, which
I remember that one.
Which if you play in FIFA and somebody says, "Oh, it's burst the onion bag," that's fine, except that I knew, because I had a son who played FIFA 6 hours in a row, and he was going to get 15 burst the onion bags in the course of 6 hours. And after the second or third one, he's throwing his controller at the screen. So, funnily enough, when EA employed me, and I went over to Vancouver and I did a couple of workshops for the guys that made it, we had two big problems at the time. One, that EA had all the licenses, so they had all the real team names, but Pro Evo was a better gameplay back then, so we had to improve the gameplay, and I told them as much. I said, the kids want to play Pro Evo, they don't want to play London United, they want to play Arsenal and Tottenham Hotspur, which you've got, but they play Pro Evo because the gameplay is better. But the second thing we need to do is completely rewrite the script, and I wrote the script down. I gave them the same line that I gave you guys this morning. It's a visual medium. You can turn the commentary down. The commentary is that soundtrack. The soundtrack to any sporting occasion which is visual is well, I use the analogy in the movie world. It is just that. It's the soundtrack, and there are some great movie soundtracks, but nobody goes to the cinema to listen to the soundtrack. You go to see the film, and if the soundtrack's good, it's fine. I often say, if you go into a Japanese restaurant or a Chinese or an Indian restaurant and there's sitar music playing, you don't want to know what it is. It's fine. You're enjoying your bhajias and you've ordered some ridiculous vindaloo, but if they start playing Italian accordion music, you kind of call in the guy and say, what's this? Why? Because it doesn't fit. And commentators have got a better chance of spoiling visual action than they have of actually enhancing it. And that was my message to EA. You're spoiling the experience for these people. We need to tone it down and just make it a bit more credible. And so I completely rewrote it, and there were no favourite lines in it.
Does anybody ever come up to you and try to say the lines that they used to say to them? Over and over?
No, I used to. I mean, because our boys were a kind of at prep school and into early secondary education, and because they were playing and they were all playing FIFA all the time, and my voice was echoing around the houses of all my best friends. I mean, occasionally in the school car park, I get, "Oh, you fucking had to listen to you all back in day," you know. and sometimes I heard it coming out of one of our boys' rooms, and it's a bit spooky hearing yourself coming out of your boy's bedroom. Yeah,
but
fantastic. Whatever.
Thank you. I appreciate that. The floor is open. We got about, anywhere from about 15 to 20 minutes here, so the floor is open. What do you want to ask Clive Tyldesley? Really, we got Clive rules in place.
Yeah, no sort of favourite goals or other. And try and make it relating to what you're actually doing.
Yeah. Like a room full of sports journalists, we can surely come up with better questions than what's your favorite goal you've ever seen. So, the mic's going out. Who wants it? Hands up. Anybody got a question? Things that you came in wanting to know, or you weren't thought of since the talk started?
I'm going to stand up.
Stand up. Introduce yourself.
Sorry.
Hi, I'm Owen.
Hold on, we got a mic situation.
Sorry. Yeah, just pop it. No, I think I stood on it.
There you go, pal.
On purpose.
Right.
Yeah.
Hi, I'm Owen, and I was just wondering, do you know when you're commentating, you have all your statistics down, you have the names of the players, managers, so that you can give us information as the viewers. But you were talking before about Peter Drury and how he kind of has poetry in the commentary. Do you think that's something you can learn, or do you think you may just have that, or you don't?
You would think that after these 137 years that I've been commentating, that I've established you were talking about the brand. I have actually been sat at home watching a game, and my wife, who actually runs a PR company herself, she owns her own PR company, and so she's very media savvy. And she's kind of, I don't have an agent, but she kind of looks after my diary and stuff. So she keeps an eye on social media too. And we were watching a game. She says, "You're getting dogs abuse here." I said, "What?" Said, "Your commentary on this game is getting criticised." I said, "Well, I'm not there. It's not me." She said, "No, I know, but somebody's decided it was you, and this train has started on X. Bloody Clive Tyldesley is, well, whatever." And so eventually, I've got whatever 100,000 followers, so I'm able to say, take a picture of me with a glass of wine and the TV. It's not me. I'm not there, But it just shows you how mad it is. There's so much more content, so much more football commentary now than there was 15 years ago, and certainly 30 years ago. So much more content, full stop, that actually I think we've all kind of morphed into one a bit. And it's good that somebody like Peter is very distinctive in what he does. So I like him as a guy. I like his attempt to use the vocabulary in his own way, but no, it's, as the title of my book, not for me, Clive.
And quickly,
yeah.
My mum's a massive fan and she'd be very unhappy if I didn't get a picture with you at the end. Is that okay?
We can do that at the end, yeah.
His mom wants
yeah.
it, right?
Does your dad know about this, yeah? Just got to be careful.
Anybody else? Yeah, we'll go, here, you got your hand up, and then we'll come back over here.
Hi, I'm Rachel.
Hello, Rachel.
Nice to meet you. I would just like to ask, because you've covered, you're saying that sport doesn't, like, at the end of the day, you just report on football matches, not really changing a game, but actually sport is in certain aspects of it, there's loads of controversy around sport and sporting events. How do you and you've covered so many, and historic events on and off the pitch has been happening, how do you kind of separate that and what's going on outside and try and remain impartial or try and convey it without a bias of if it's something that's really passionate to you?
I understand your question. It's a good question. There's a guy called Dan Rohn going to come and speak to you quite soon, yeah?
Yes, a couple weeks.
And Dan will be able to answer that question much better because he is the BBC's sports news editor. You're right, I do have to deal occasionally with things over and beyond football. Without being too somber about it, in 1985 I went to cover a Champions League final, European Cup final as it was, for a local radio station, and finished up counting dead bodies. I'd never seen a dead body in my life, and they were piled up on top of another in a stadium in Belgium. So you've kind of never quite know what's going to happen. And certainly from that day onwards, I've always sort of been wary of it. I think you've got to try to anticipate as much as you can. So a good example would be a few years ago I commentated on an England game in Bulgaria, and there was a feeling that there might be some racial abuse of the black England players. And we talked about it in editorial meetings and how we might cover it. We didn't have ownership of the pictures, so we weren't quite good. It was a Bulgarian director, so we couldn't control what was shown. Sometimes when you're commentating in we're outside usually, we're not usually behind glass, but you've got your headphones on, you've got a mix of the crowd effects and your own voice, and sometimes you hear things that you're not quite sure, and so we had people listening out to see what was happening, and sure enough, there was some boos, and the game came to a halt. The referee called it to a halt, and I got a close-up of Raheem Sterling, and I hope this doesn't sound too boastful, but if you were to really press me on the best commentary line that I've ever come up with, it wouldn't be "and Solskjaer's won it" or anything like that. I got this close-up of Raheem Sterling, and he just looked bemused. He didn't look upset. He almost had a kind of a wry grin on his face. And I said, "What must he be thinking?" And then from somewhere in the left side of my brain, I said, "I will never know." And I think, actually, if you can somehow capture the hopelessness and helplessness of a situation like that, rather than try to go in too heavy-handed and become sort of some kind of moral judge. I think we've probably all heard, oh, nobody likes to see that. Yeah, well, what does that mean? You know, you've almost got to come up with something stronger and more pertinent to whatever the situation is that you're dealing with. And actually that kind of sort of helpless admission from me, I'm not black, I'll never know. There were a lot of people who got in touch with me afterwards and said, that's and that was all I really needed to say from that point onwards. After that, it was just description. I had some background stuff on previous incidents involving Bulgarian crowds, and I had a little bit of background about we got some close-ups of the guys who were doing the shouting are all in the same uniforms, and I had some information on them. And then I kind of went back into sort of nerd commentator mode because I had this information. But yeah, if it's something emotional, then yeah, just go with your senses and hope that you're saying the right thing, but then don't become too judgmental. I think I can give you a million examples where you become involved in the game. I'm very fortunate. If you were to nick my phone, you'd be surprised which numbers I've got in my contacts. You know, we talked about it this morning, did we? Whether Roy Hodgson was the manager of probably the most difficult game I ever did, England-Iceland. Huge shock, defeat for England and major tournament. My wife and I have been out for dinner with Roy and Sheila Hodgson. He's a really good guy. He's a really good friend. And I'm calling for him to be sacked, basically, at the final whistle, you know, to 20-odd million people. But, I mean, as it happened, Roy had resigned pretty much before the final whistle was blown, so he kind of knew it was time to go. But, yeah, there are those sort of conflicts, but they're not... I'm from Bury. I grew up a Manchester United fan, but it kind of left me once I started to get to know people, and you're commentating on your mates. And that's when it's most difficult, really, when you know the families and you know what it means to them, and you know how helpless you can be when sport starts to turn against you and you're on a losing streak. So, and then, yeah, those bigger incidents involving racism and sexism and stuff. Yeah, just don't go any further than than you're comfortable with. Just, yes, say what you see, and then leave it to people to make their own minds up. I think that's all you can do. That answered your question. Good.
Cam, did you have a question?
No, don't worry. I actually have many questions.
One over here, I'll take it over.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Thanks. Him first, then you. Here you go, Cam.
Hi Clive, my name is Ethan.
Hi, Ethan.
My question was, and you did actually mention it in your previous answer, sorry, I know it's not the brightest topic, but just going back to that tragic day in 1985, a high school stadium disaster, I understand you were reporting on it. How were you able to cope reporting on such a surreal event? How did you maintain professionalism? How did you keep your emotions in line? And just how did you keep your tone respectful for something as tragic as that?
I wasn't prepared for it. You can sit down, Ethan. I mean, and maybe because I wasn't prepared for it, it was on local radio, so the jeopardy was nothing like as high as if you are that main TV commentator dealing with 20-odd million people. And actually, the BBC made a bit of a mess on it at the night. They came on air. We knew that people. If it was a 7:45 kickoff, the BBC came on air at 7:30. The wall had gone down during the Radio City news programme between 6:30 and 7, and there were confirmed deaths by the time the BBC went on air. And Jimmy Hill just did the same intro. There was no sort of, you've turned on for a football match, but we've got this. And Barry Davis they kind of handed to Barry, really, and then Barry had to start talking about it. I'd been at Radio City in Liverpool I went in '77, so I'm not a Scouser, but I'd lived on Merseyside for 8 years. I knew what football meant to the people there, and obviously we had Hillsborough still to come. But I went to Rotterdam 2 weeks earlier. Everton reached the Cup Winners' Cup final, and it was joyous. It was like Everton's first ever major, European final. There were like 3 generations of fans there from the same streets as the Liverpool fans. There's no geographical division, no real religious division, if the truth's told. You just either red or blue. Yeah, that's how you're born, kind of. So from the same streets, the same people. And there was a real air of festival about it because it was new to them. 2 weeks later in Brussels, we did a show during the afternoon. It was just 20,000 lads, been here, seen it, done it, got the T-shirt, here we go again. There was just a different feel. There were no granddads, no kids. It was just 20,000 lads. And the stadium was, it was falling down even before they went in. The UEFA cocked up completely. They had all the Juve fans down at one end, and then Liverpool had this open end, and then right in the corner of the same end, but just with a little bit of a fence in between them, were all the tickets they'd sold in Brussels, and they'd nearly all been bought by Italian restaurateurs, and there was predominantly Juventus in the Liverpool end, and not just Juventus, but Juventus guys that just hadn't come to fight, they were just there, they were just Brussels people. And it was very territorial football in the 1980s. Liverpool fans saw black and white in their end, wanted it out. You could pick up rocks off the terracing, it was crumbling. And it was just this awful thing, and they were all trying to get out, and it was right, I can see it now, down in the corner, and they just crushed the wall, and so we were actually live on air. I had Ian St John with me. You know that name, St Greaves? Yeah, very, very famous Scottish and Liverpool international centre forward. And Ian's son was there. He was in the stadium. So Ian's now, he's got a child, his only child is in the stadium. So he's worried for him. We had a guy who sadly is not with us anymore, Phil Easton, who was he was a Liverpool fan, but he was a DJ. And he was kind of doing some presenting, so he was around. And would you believe, on my sports team at Radio City at the time was Richard Quays, but Richard wasn't there. Richard had done Rotterdam 2 weeks earlier, and we brought the guy who was in the studio, a guy called Richard Jardine, who was the brother of Tony Jardine, who did some F1 later, and he was there, but he was a real rookie. And you know, we were dealing with the sort of information coming. You can imagine in 1985, you're not looking at your phone to see the latest news, you're just hearing things. And eventually I said, look, Phil, you take over, the presenter, I'll go and see what I can find. And I went down, and I mean, this is again 1985, it could have been 1885 really, because underneath the stands there was just mayhem. There were ambulances and there were police, but there was nobody cordoning off anybody to stop them going. You just kind of walked through. It's like a scene from a movie. And suddenly I just looked and I saw somebody carrying a stretcher, and there were these sort of archways underneath the stadium. And this body was just put down, but it didn't go on the floor, it went on top. Yeah, of some more. And I'd never seen a dead body in my life before. And I'm looking at about 20. And so how did I deal with it? I've no idea, except that I went back up the stairs and, you know, Phil said, what's going on? I just described what I'd seen. And a really weird thing happened that a couple of mates of mine who I managed to get some tickets for came, like, were waving to us. We could see them. They were actually in the main stand. They'd found their way into the main stand. And this guy, Tony, said, I'm going back to the hotel. It's mayhem. So I kind of stopped and went over and said, what is it? And he told me. he told me everything that happened. He'd been in the Liverpool fans and he described the whole thing. And then you've got one eyewitness. I mean, it's not really journalism, to be honest. But I went back and, started to report. And I finished my piece by saying, and if Tony Billsborough's wife is listening, him and his father are fine, and they're going back to the hotel. And I just wish I could tell every family waiting in Liverpool the same thing. Now, it got worse and worse as the night went on, but I can't give you any lessons from that night, because there's no point in you going to cover Salford City next week and preparing yourself for the possibility that there's going to be some terrible human tragedy. But I do think, without trying to sell, Taylor's fare to you, that if you engage yourself in training yourself to be a journalist and asking the right questions in the right order and remaining objective and trying to be devil's advocate and trying to check things and seeking accuracy, seeking context, then it should equip you to deal with pretty much anything that comes your way. But I just hope that none of you ever have to go through that. I never called a goalkeeping error a disaster or a tragedy from that point onwards. People die in disasters and tragedies. Loris Karius letting the ball slip through his hands is not a tragedy. Let's have an uplifter. Sorry, I don't want to leave you with that.
I mean, I just want to pick up on that, because there is this thing that sometimes in sports where I think we think we're not news reporters at times, but really any sporting event can turn into that, and we really just got to start describing what we see. Absolutely. Charlie, you had one,
Hi, I'm Charlie.
Yeah, Charlie?
So you said earlier about, like, when you were at Nottingham, you were the editor of the newspaper. I'm sure you got loads of other opportunities here and there, and here we get an amplitude of opportunities. How do you know which ones to take? Because obviously you can't take every single opportunity that comes your way.
In terms of career opportunities?
Yeah, just opportunities within the industry.
Well, if you get one, it's good. It's one better than none. If you get two, then you're being spoilt a bit. I mean, I've never really been spoilt for choice at any stage in my career. I've been very lucky. The breaks have come at good times. I do think the first break is the biggest break. The biggest moment in my career was getting a phone call from the program controller at Radio Trent when I was swatting away for my finals in my little hovel of a house in Church Road, Nottingham, saying, "I'd like you to come and join us." And I said, what degree do I need? And he said, "You don't need a degree to make tea." He said, just finish your finals, he said, and then come and join us. But I mean, I went Radio Trent, Radio City, Granada. Here I worked for ITV, and then I had 4 years at the BBC. Then I came back to ITV, and they binned me 5 years ago. I haven't had an employer since then. I've done freelance work since then. I haven't had lots and lots of bosses. And I've had discussions with Sky, as you might imagine, at various stages, sort of drunken lunches with head of Sky Football or whatever. But I think you'll find opportunities tough to come by. So you might prove me wrong. You might suddenly in 3 years' time have six different broadcasters chasing you, and I've no idea how to advise you in that situation. Just get drunk and put your finger in the one, whatever. But there are going to be more graduates than there are going to be jobs, by the way. And however many of you care as deeply about what I care about, what I hope you care about, there are people sitting in universities all around this country who are after the same jobs as you are. And so that first thing that we said at the start, what's going to set you apart from them? Your education here is certainly a big help, but the other things that you can do. I mean, I was talking to you this morning and saying, all of you, and saying, you are journalists now. you know, and it's a 24/7 thing. You can't watch Match of the Day just as a fan anymore. You've got to watch it as an editor. You can't listen to your favourite sporting podcast just as a subscriber or a follower anymore. You've got to think about it as if you were editing that show and how it could be better. So that's what you've committed to. I'm sorry, but you have. And I think from what I've seen today, I've been really encouraged. I think you're all serious about it. The just fact that you're here tonight when you could be doing much better things, it's a vocation. It's a calling, and you're answering it. So follow it, and take it to the max. And don't lose sight of your ambition, but don't lose sight of what draws you to wanting to do the job. And it should be somewhere in there, in your heart now, something in your soul that you really, really want to see through. And by the way, I would have given my right arm to be in your position instead of doing industrial economics and politics in my first year at university. So make the most of it.
We have time for one more, maybe two. So, over here.
I'm cool if you guys are, so don't worry.
There you go.
Hello, Clive. My
Hey there.
name's Liam.
Hi, Liam.
Now, question is, when going into a big fixture, doing commentary, what do you value more? Creating moments like Solskjaer, lines that resonate with people, shape memories, or being informative, getting the statistics and painting the game out?
Were you in the session this morning? You're not first year, no?
Yes, I'm
You were.
first year.
So, but I mean, we talked we covered, I think, quite a bit of that. It's a good question. The Solskjaer's only going to happen once every decade or so. We're talking about games for 20 million, 20, 30 million viewers, and dramatic moments, which, I mean, Manchester United fans haven't really had anything better since. So you can only work with the material you get, and if you get those moments, and I haven't talked too much, but you'll hear a lot about the name Reg Guttridge when we do our sessions, because he was my mentor, sadly not with us anymore, a boxing commentator, and he was very big on seizing those moments and making the most of them and becoming a little part of those moments. But I don't think you can aspire to that. I think that you've got to do the 50 games in between Gerrard's goal in Istanbul and Solskjaer's goal in Barcelona. You've got to do all those games in between in possibly anticipation that one of those might produce that kind of moment. So I think I'm my own biggest critic. I might appear like a big head at times, but very rarely when I've watched a game back, and I usually try to watch them, well, I do watch them all back, very rarely am I totally satisfied with what I've done. It's just not a scripted performance. You're not going to get it all right. You know, we had a laugh this morning about me talking about Dembele when Yamal was in shot. And yeah, you want to, next time, you want to get that moment, so just keep trying to improve. And it's the regularity of the work. I mean, if you're lucky enough, whatever it is that your ambition is, may not be commentary, maybe reporting, maybe presenter, maybe an editor, if you're lucky enough to get the opportunity to be repeating what it is you're doing, then you should be learning all the time. And because you've learned, when that Solskjaer moment comes, hopefully you'll know how to handle it. So, but don't create a Solskjaer moment when there isn't one. Somebody once said to me about a wonderful commentator on BBC Radio, again, sadly not with us anymore, Peter Jones, that he could make a bad game sound good. And I said to the guy, Peter would never do that. You know, Peter was too good a journalist to do that. He would always call a bad game a bad game. But when the good games came, wow, who did you want on the microphone? Peter Jones, yeah.